The unspoken language of attention. Attention is not just politeness, it's psychological currency. For women, it carries layers of meaning that run deeper than words. A glance, a pause, or even silence can hold more weight than an entire paragraph. When you think about it, attention functions almost like an invisible conversation happening beneath the spoken one. Psychologists often point out that women are generally more attuned to nonverbal cues than men. This isn't simply an opinion. Decades of research support the idea. One of the most cited findings comes from Dr. Albert Mehrabian's model of communication, which suggests that only about 7% of meaning comes from the actual words we speak. The rest, 93%, is delivered through tone, posture, facial expressions, and body language. While the exact percentages are debated, the central idea is clear. What's unsaid often matters more than what's said. Women, on average, tend to notice and interpret these unsaid signals with sharper accuracy. Consider a simple example. You're talking with a woman at a coffee shop. You share a story you think is funny. She doesn't laugh outright. Instead, she lowers her eyes, hides a half smile, and lightly touches her face. Without saying a word, she's already told you something. Maybe she's amused but too shy to show it. Maybe she's embarrassed because she didn't quite get the joke. Or maybe she's weighing whether your humor matches her personality. If you focus only on her silence, you miss the real message. Her subtle cues are the language of attention, and understanding them can change the entire meaning of the exchange. Why women notice more. One reason women often sharpen this skill comes from evolutionary psychology. Across history, women had to rely on subtle cues to assess trust, safety, and intention. Imagine being part of a small tribe thousands of years ago. Knowing whether a stranger's smile was genuine or a mask for aggression could mean survival. Detecting insincerity, danger, or hidden hostility before it became obvious helped protect not only themselves but also their children and community. Over time, this sensitivity to nonverbal signals became deeply ingrained. Even today, studies suggest women score higher than men on measures of emotional intelligence, especially in recognizing microexpressions and shifts in tone. These aren't just random quirks. They're adaptive traits shaped by generations of necessity. It means that in everyday life, a woman might pick up on tension in your voice before you even realize you're stressed. She might notice hesitation in your eye contact when you're unsure. These details don't escape her. They inform her impression of you, whether consciously or not. Attention as connection. For men, the implication is simple but profound. Don't just listen to her words. Watch the rest of the conversation happening outside the sentences. Notice how her head tilts when she's curious, how long her eye contact lingers when she's engaged, or how her tone softens when she feels safe. That's where the truth often hides. But attention isn't just about decoding signals. It's also about giving them. When you give someone your undivided attention, you're sending a message that they matter. For women, this is especially powerful. A distracted glance at your phone or scanning the room while she's speaking communicates disinterest far louder than words of reassurance. On the other hand, leaning in, holding eye contact, and responding thoughtfully shows her she's valued. In relationships, that simple act of attention often matters more than elaborate gestures. Memory and the weight of moments. Attention also connects directly to memory. Think of memory as a library that doesn't just store what was seen and heard, but also how it felt in the moment. If you're fully attentive during a conversation, you're not only remembering the words, you're remembering the emotional tone. That emotional imprint sticks. For example, recall the last time someone truly listened to you. Chances are, you don't just remember what was said, you remember how it felt to be heard. The same works in reverse. If you half listen or dismiss subtle cues, that too becomes part of her memory of you. Attention shapes not just the present moment, but the long-term story she tells herself about who you are. Silence speaks volumes. One of the most overlooked aspects of attention is silence. Many people are uncomfortable with pauses in conversation, but silence itself can be one of the richest forms of communication. When a woman pauses before answering, it doesn't always mean she has nothing to say. It might mean she's considering, reflecting, or inviting you to notice her unspoken thoughts. The key is not to rush in and fill the gap, but to stay present. In fact, women often use silence as a way to test depth. If you can sit comfortably in silence without becoming restless or defensive, it signals patience and emotional steadiness. Those qualities often speak louder than anything you could say. Attention in daily life. This unspoken language isn't limited to dating or romantic situations. It plays out everywhere. In the workplace, a woman might read your slight hesitation before a meeting and recognize you're anxious even if you claim you're fine. Among friends, she might notice that your laugh rings hollow and gently ask what's really going on. These subtle readings of attention are part of why women often play the role of emotional connectors in groups. For men, learning to tune into this layer of communication can improve every relationship, not just romantic ones. It makes conversations more authentic, reduces misunderstandings, and creates a sense of trust that words alone can't build. Practicing the skill. The good news is that this isn't an ability reserved only for women. Men can learn to notice and respond to nonverbal cues with practice. Start by slowing down. Instead of focusing solely on what to say next, watch the person in front of you. Notice changes in facial expression, shifts in tone, or the way posture mirrors or distances itself from you. Another exercise is to observe conversations when you're not involved. Sit in a cafe and watch two people interact. Without hearing their words, try to guess their emotional tone. Are they comfortable, tense, excited, or distant? With practice, your brain begins to connect patterns and meaning. Finally, reflect on your own signals. What do your pauses, gestures, or silences communicate? Self-awareness is the first step in mastering attention both ways, understanding others and being understood yourself. The deeper meaning of attention. At its core, attention is about presence. It's about being fully engaged in the moment, aware that words are only one small part of communication. For women, this unspoken language carries centuries of survival, adaptation, and emotional intelligence. For men, learning to read and respond to it is less about strategy and more about respect. When you recognize that attention is currency, you begin to see every glance, every pause, every silence as meaningful. And when you give your attention deliberately, you're offering something far more valuable than clever words. You're offering yourself. In the end, the unspoken language of attention is not a mystery to solve, but a skill to practice. It's about honoring the reality that most of what we communicate lives between the lines. And if you can tune into that hidden conversation, you won't just hear her better, you'll understand her in a way that words alone could never achieve. The echo of memory. Memory is not just a list of facts. It's not a cold ledger of dates and events, neatly filed away in the mind. For women especially, memory often carries texture, emotional color, tone, and even the subtle atmosphere surrounding an experience. It is not only about what happened, but about how it felt. Psychologists have long studied these differences in memory between men and women. Studies published by the American Psychological Association show that women, on average, recall emotional experiences more vividly than men. This isn't a matter of anecdote or stereotype. Brain imaging offers real evidence. Neurological scans consistently show that women tend to display higher activity in the hippocampus, the region of the brain responsible for forming memories, and in the amygdala, the center for processing emotions. What this means is straightforward but powerful. When something carries emotional weight, women are more likely to encode it deeply and retrieve it later with a richness of detail. This is why a woman might not only remember what was said on a rainy Tuesday evening months ago, but also the environment around it. She may recall the tremor in your voice, the smell of coffee drifting in from the kitchen, or the way you absent-mindedly checked your phone during the conversation. Details that you considered trivial, or perhaps never even noticed, can become part of her memory. For her, the event is not a single snapshot, but a layered painting, infused with feeling. Because of this, memory carries echoes. A careless comment, perhaps said in frustration or without thought, can linger in her mind far longer than you expect. For example, the words, "you're overreacting," might seem harmless in the moment, but in her memory, they don't exist alone. They attach themselves to the emotional experience of feeling dismissed, unheard, or minimized. Over time, such echoes accumulate, shaping how safe, respected, and valued she feels in the relationship. The opposite is also true. Small, thoughtful gestures can echo just as strongly, but in a positive way. Bringing her favorite tea when she's stressed, leaving a short note of encouragement, or remembering to check in after an important day may seem minor to you. Yet these small acts can become embedded in her memory as symbols of care and reliability. They are the kinds of recollections she may return to when deciding whether she can trust, relax, or lean on you. The gesture itself fades with time, but the meaning lingers. Evolutionary biology offers an explanation for why women's memory often takes this rich, emotional form. In ancestral environments, remembering details about social bonds, alliances, and caregiving could mean the difference between survival and failure. Who could be trusted? Who offered support in times of stress? Who betrayed the group? Or who came through in critical moments? Women, tasked with nurturing children and maintaining social cohesion, would have benefited greatly from the ability to encode and recall the emotional textures of interactions. Memory, in this sense, was not just a personal tool, but a survival mechanism, shaping how groups functioned and endured. For men, this understanding has practical significance. It means realizing that interactions don't simply disappear once they're over. Words and actions leave impressions that live on, sometimes quietly, sometimes vividly. Each moment with her has the potential to become a building block in the larger story of your relationship. A single sharp remark may feel fleeting to you, but for her, it may resurface years later, wrapped in the memory of how it made her feel. Likewise, consistent small acts of kindness can create a foundation of trust that feels nearly unshakable. This is not about walking on eggshells or fearing that every word will be remembered against you. Rather, it's about recognizing the weight memory carries in shaping the emotional landscape of a relationship. If memory is the architect of the past, then emotions are the compass of the present, guiding desires, decisions, and values. The two are intertwined. Memory shapes how she interprets your actions today, and emotions shape the way those memories will be recorded tomorrow. Consider the difference between factual memory and emotional memory. You may remember that you went to dinner on her birthday. She may remember how present you were at the table, whether you were engaged in conversation or distracted, whether you looked at her like she mattered. You remember the event. She remembers the feeling. Over time, it is these emotional memories that accumulate, giving a relationship its texture. This perspective also explains why unresolved conflicts can persist. When an issue isn't fully addressed, it doesn't simply vanish with time. Instead, it sits in memory, tied to emotions that can resurface with surprising strength. A past dismissal, betrayal, or misunderstanding can echo years later, shaping reactions to completely unrelated events. Healing, then, often requires not just solving the problem logically, but reshaping the emotional memory tied to it, replacing feelings of neglect or pain with experiences of care, validation, and repair. On the brighter side, this also means that intentional efforts to create positive emotional memories can have lasting impact. Shared laughter, small surprises, meaningful conversations, or quiet moments of support all embed themselves in memory. They become reference points she returns to when she asks herself whether she feels secure, loved, and understood. In this way, memory acts as a silent ledger of the relationship, not just a tally of events, but of how those events felt. The beauty is that you don't need grand gestures to fill this ledger with good entries. In fact, it's usually the opposite. The little things matter more than you think because they are what memory tends to preserve with the most warmth. Ultimately, the echo of memory reminds us that relationships are not built in isolated moments. They are built in the accumulation of remembered feelings, large and small. Every conversation, every choice, every interaction contributes to the atmosphere she carries with her. For her, memory is not passive storage. It is an active presence, shaping how she sees you today and how she will respond to you tomorrow. If you want to nurture trust and closeness, pay attention not only to what you say, but to how you say it. Not only to what you do, but to how you make her feel while doing it. Because long after the words are forgotten, the memory of the feeling remains. And in that memory lies the architecture of the bond you share, the emotional compass. For many women, emotions are not simply background noise humming behind daily life. They act more like a compass, a finely tuned instrument pointing toward what feels aligned or misaligned. Where logic provides structure, emotions provide direction. They are not mere feelings floating around without cause. They are signals, markers, and warnings that guide choices, relationships, and even survival. Neuroscience backs this up. Antonio Damasio's groundbreaking work showed that without emotions, decision-making collapses entirely. His research with patients who had brain injuries revealed something astonishing. Even though they retained full intelligence and logical ability, they struggled with the simplest decisions. Faced with choosing between chicken or beef for lunch, or whether to schedule a meeting in the morning or afternoon, they would become paralyzed. Logic alone provided no anchor. What was missing was the emotional weight that normally helps us rank options and move forward. In other words, emotions are not the opposite of reason. They are the foundation that allows reason to function. For women, this connection between emotion and decision making tends to be more consciously integrated. Psychologists call this effective reasoning, the process of making choices not just by weighing facts, but also by evaluating how something feels. Imagine choosing an apartment. A strictly logical approach might involve running the numbers, comparing square footage, utilities, commute times, and rent prices. But effective reasoning asks another question. Do I feel safe here? Do I feel at peace in this space? That emotional dimension may ultimately prevent her from moving into a place where the energy feels unsettling, even if the price is perfect on paper. This is not irrationality. In fact, it's a form of intelligence, one that is often overlooked in cultures that prize logic over feeling. A woman's emotional compass can detect subtleties that spreadsheets can't capture. For example, a man might enter a business partnership because the numbers check out and the contract looks airtight. A woman, on the other hand, may notice small signs of unease in the partner's tone, posture, or energy. While difficult to quantify, these feelings often prove accurate, revealing dishonesty or instability that logic overlooked. History is filled with examples of people who ignored their instincts, only to regret it later. Unfortunately, this emotional compass is often misunderstood or dismissed. When a woman expresses discomfort or hesitation, she may hear phrases like, "You're just being emotional," or "Stop overreacting." These dismissals not only invalidate her inner experience, but also strip away a valuable source of information. Her feelings are not random static. They are data points, sometimes invisible to logic, but essential to understanding the full picture. To brush them aside is like ignoring a compass because it doesn't fit neatly into a map. For men, respecting this compass doesn't mean abandoning logic. It means recognizing that logic and emotion work best when combined. Numbers can reveal probabilities, but emotions reveal meaning. Logic may tell you which investment carries the lowest risk, but emotions can tell you whether the partnership feels trustworthy. Together, they create a fuller, more reliable guide than either could alone. This is especially important in relationships. A man may interpret a woman's emotional expression as irrational or overly sensitive when, in reality, she is responding to cues he simply hasn't noticed. For instance, she may sense distance in his tone before he's even aware of pulling away. Or she may feel unease about a friend he trusts completely, picking up subtle signals of competition or disrespect. If he dismisses her feelings outright, he risks missing insights that could protect both of them. That's why the phrase women's intuition exists. It's not magic or mysticism. It's the product of heightened emotional awareness combined with attentiveness to context. Women, on average, are socialized to be more observant of relational dynamics, body language, and shifts in emotional tone. Over time, this builds a sensitivity that feels like intuition, but is really pattern recognition operating beneath conscious awareness. The compass is always scanning, always processing. Still, the emotional compass does not operate in isolation. Like any tool, it works best when paired with something else, in this case, empathy. Empathy acts as the bridge between her internal signals and the world around her. Without empathy, emotions can spiral inward, creating confusion. With empathy, they become a language of connection, allowing her to communicate what she feels and for others to understand it. Consider a moment of conflict. A woman may feel hurt by a careless comment. Her emotional compass signals something is wrong. Without empathy from her partner, that signal may be dismissed, leading to resentment. But with empathy, her partner can lean in and say, I didn't realize that hurt you. Tell me what you felt. Suddenly, the compass has served its purpose, not to create division, but to point toward repair. For men, learning to engage with this compass means shifting perspective. Instead of viewing emotions as obstacles, they can be seen as information. The question is not, why is she so emotional? But what are her emotions telling us about this situation? This small shift can transform the way couples navigate challenges. There's also a practical lesson here for life outside relationships. In workplaces, for example, women often catch dynamics others miss. They may sense when a team member feels excluded, or when a deal feels promising on the surface but carries hidden risks. Organizations that listen to these emotional insights often avoid pitfalls that numbers alone can't predict. Far from being liabilities, emotions are strategic assets when understood correctly. Critics sometimes argue that relying on feelings opens the door to bias. And it's true, emotions can be misread or influenced by past experiences. But the same is true of logic, which is often biased by hidden assumptions and incomplete data. The solution is not to pit logic against emotion, but to weave them together. When the compass of feeling is cross-checked with the map of reason, decisions become both grounded and meaningful. The truth is, every human being uses emotion in decision-making, whether they admit it or not. The difference is that women are often more comfortable acknowledging it, while men may disguise it under the label of gut instinct. That gut feeling is nothing more than emotion speaking in a language men find easier to accept. Recognizing this shared reliance on emotion could bridge the gap between the two perspectives, allowing for deeper respect and collaboration. Ultimately, the emotional compass is not about being right or wrong. It's about orientation. It points towards safety, connection, meaning, and truth. It warns when something feels off, and it highlights what feels fulfilling. For women, ignoring it is like walking through life blindfolded. For men, learning to understand and respect it is like gaining access to a second set of eyes, ones that see what numbers can't. When we begin to honor the compass, both in ourselves and in others, life becomes richer. Decisions are not just smart but also aligned. Relationships are not just functional but deeply connected. And perhaps most importantly, we begin to realize that emotions are not weaknesses to overcome, but strengths to embrace. They are not background noise. They are the music that guides the dance of life, the mirror of empathy. Empathy is more than simply understanding another person. It's not just about listening to their words or recognizing their emotions at face value. At its deepest level, empathy is stepping inside another person's inner world, trying on their perspective, however briefly, and feeling what life might be like through their lens. It's like holding up a mirror that reflects not only their expression, but the emotions behind it. Across decades of research, one pattern emerges again and again. Women, on average, tend to score higher on empathy-related measures. Psychologists studying emotional intelligence often find women outperforming men in tests of perspective taking, emotional recognition, and emotional responsiveness. This doesn't mean that men lack empathy, but it does suggest that many women may have a heightened sensitivity to emotional cues, both spoken and unspoken. Neuroscience sheds light on this difference. Brain imaging studies show stronger activation in what's called the mirror neuron system in women. These are the circuits in the brain that allow us to mirror another person's experience. If you watch someone stub their toe, you might wince. That's your mirror neurons firing, letting you feel a shadow of their pain. When you see a friend's eyes fill with tears, your chest may tighten as if you're absorbing a part of their sadness. For women, this system tends to be more responsive, meaning they can often pick up on subtle emotions before a word is spoken. Imagine this familiar scene. You come home after a long, exhausting day. You don't complain. You don't launch into a story about what went wrong. Instead, you quietly put down your bag, shoulders slightly hunched, your voice flatter than usual when you say hello. Before you can even gather your thoughts, she looks at you and softly asks, "Rough day? What happened?" That is empathy in motion, the ability to catch signals, to read between the lines, to sense what lingers beneath the surface. This ability does more than decode moods. It builds intimacy. When someone feels seen and understood without having to explain, it creates a powerful bond. For couples, empathy is one of the cornerstones of trust. It reassures you that you are not alone in carrying your struggles. It fosters the kind of connection where silence itself can be meaningful. But like any gift, empathy carries a shadow side. Constantly tuning into the emotions of others can blur personal boundaries. For many women, this heightened sensitivity means they don't just feel their own emotions, they end up carrying the weight of others' feelings as well. Psychologists sometimes refer to this as emotional labor or emotional contagion. It's the invisible work of noticing moods, smoothing conflicts, offering comfort, and absorbing stress, all while managing their own inner worlds. Over time, this can lead to emotional fatigue. Many women don't even realize how much they are holding. They take on the frustration of a coworker, the stress of their partner, the disappointment of a friend, the worries of a child. Each small act of empathy feels natural, but the accumulation can be draining. This is why a woman might sometimes feel emotionally exhausted even if nothing in her own life has gone particularly wrong. She's been carrying invisible cargo, the unspoken burdens of the people she loves. Culture plays a role in shaping this ability. From a young age, girls are often encouraged to notice how others feel. They might be praised for being thoughtful, told to be considerate, or reminded to take care of others. While boys are often rewarded for independence and resilience, girls are subtly reinforced for attentiveness and compassion. These early social nudges don't create empathy out of nothing, but they do strengthen it into a lifelong skill. By adulthood, many women are highly attuned to emotional undercurrents, able to pick up on cues that others might miss. For men, understanding this dynamic means two things. First, don't take her empathy for granted. It's easy to assume that her ability to read you, comfort you, or anticipate your needs will always be there. But remember, it costs her something. Behind her kindness may be hours of unseen emotional effort. Recognizing her empathy and expressing gratitude for it validates the invisible work she does. Second, recognize that when she is emotionally drained, it may not only be from her own struggles. She may be carrying pieces of yours as well. If she seems quieter than usual or less responsive, it may not mean disinterest. It could mean her emotional reserves are low from shouldering more than one person's feelings. In these moments, offering her empathy in return, asking how she feels, listening without judgment, allowing her space to unload, creates balance in the relationship. Empathy, at its heart, is reciprocal. When both people in a relationship practice it, it becomes a cycle of mutual care rather than a one-sided burden. It allows each person to be both a mirror and a reflection, creating harmony rather than imbalance. And there's another layer. Empathy is closely tied to intuition. The same skill that lets a woman notice the tension in your shoulders can also help her sense hidden patterns in a conversation or anticipate shifts in a relationship before they become obvious. This is why her insights sometimes seem mysterious, almost uncanny. She isn't reading your mind. She's reading the micro signals you don't realize you're giving off. She's tracking the unspoken rhythm beneath words, and her empathy acts as the antenna. When you think of empathy as a mirror, it becomes clearer. It reflects not just what you present on the surface, but also the subtle truths beneath. And when she looks into that mirror, she doesn't only see you, she sometimes feels you in ways you might not even feel yourself. That is the quiet power of empathy. It's not flashy, it's not loud, but it's transformative. To truly appreciate it, imagine a world without it. Imagine speaking about your struggles only to be met with indifference, or sharing joy only to see it fall flat. Without empathy, relationships become transactional, conversations shallow, and connections brittle. Empathy is the glue that holds human bonds together, and for many women, it is not just a skill, but a way of moving through life. So the next time she senses your mood before you speak, pause and recognize what's happening. The mirror of empathy is reflecting back your inner world. Honor it, appreciate it, and when possible, reflect it back to her so she too can feel the relief of being understood. Because empathy is not meant to be carried by one person alone. It is a shared mirror, one that grows clearer, kinder, and more luminous when both people choose to look into it together. The mystery of intuition. Intuition often gets brushed aside as something vague, mystical, or unscientific. People sometimes call it a gut feeling or dismiss it as superstition. But psychology paints a much more grounded picture. Intuition isn't magic. It's the brain's ability to recognize patterns at lightning speed without us consciously knowing how we got there. In essence, it's rapid, unconscious processing that surfaces as a hunch. Women, in particular, are often noted for leaning on intuition in social contexts. And this isn't just cultural myth. Studies published in the Journal of Nonverbal Behavior and other psychological research show that women tend to be more accurate at detecting deception through microexpressions, those fleeting facial movements that last less than half a second. These microexpressions can betray emotions someone is trying to hide. A tiny twitch of the mouth, a flash in the eyes, or a stiffening around the jaw. All of these are signals. Most people miss them, but women, on average, pick them up more consistently. So when people say, she just knows, what's really happening is her brain is rapidly processing dozens of subtle cues. A shift in your tone, a pause that lingers at beat too long, a smile that doesn't quite reach your eyes. She's not consciously ticking off a checklist. Instead, her subconscious is gathering and interpreting information in real time, delivering it to her awareness as a sense or a nudge. It feels mysterious, but it's actually data processing at a speed and depth most of us overlook. The evolutionary roots of intuition. Why might this ability have developed more strongly in women? Some evolutionary psychologists argue that historically, being attuned to subtle cues in social environments was a matter of survival. In early human communities, women often had to navigate complex social webs, keeping children safe, maintaining alliances, sensing potential threats within the group. Detecting deception, aggression, or dishonesty quickly could make the difference between safety and danger. Over generations, these skills sharpened. A woman who could pick up on hidden hostility or unspoken intentions was better equipped to protect herself and her family. What may have started as a survival mechanism gradually became embedded as a psychological strength, an ability to notice and respond to subtle social dynamics. This doesn't mean men lack intuition. Everyone has the capacity for rapid, unconscious pattern recognition. But cultural conditioning often teaches men to downplay or ignore these instincts, while women may be encouraged to trust them more openly. The result is a stereotype that women are more intuitive, which, in many contexts, has some scientific backing. Why ignoring intuition can be a mistake. For men, dismissing a woman's intuition can be costly. It doesn't mean she's always right. Nobody is. But when she voices a gut feeling, it's often a signal that her subconscious has picked up on cues you might have missed. Maybe she notices tension in someone's posture, or hears hesitation in their voice, or senses a mismatch between words and body language. She may not be able to articulate it immediately, but that doesn't mean it isn't real. Think of intuition as the brain's summary sheet. Instead of listing out every detail, the micro pause here, the forced laugh there, it delivers the conclusion in the form of a feeling. Something's off. Ignoring that summary means discarding valuable data, even if it's not yet expressed in logical language. In relationships, this dynamic can play out in everyday ways. A partner might say, I don't trust that person, or something about this situation feels wrong. The response shouldn't be blind acceptance, but it also shouldn't be immediate dismissal. Taking intuition seriously means recognizing it as a form of intelligence, not mystical, but deeply human. Intuition in daily life. Consider how often intuition shows up in small, ordinary ways. You're about to cross the street, and for some reason, you hesitate. A second later, a car speeds through the red light, or you meet someone new, and though they're friendly, something feels inconsistent. Months later, you find out they weren't who they seemed. In hindsight, you realize your gut was right all along. For women, these moments often occur in social or emotional settings. Research suggests that women may be more adept at reading facial expressions, tone of voice, and nonverbal cues. These skills combine into what we casually call women's intuition. It's less about mystical foresight and more about finely tuned perception. From intuition to connection, when we step back, Intuition isn't just about detecting lies or threats. It's also about connection. Picking up on subtle cues means being able to sense what someone else feels, even when they don't say it. A woman may notice that her friend insists she's fine, but carries a tightness in her shoulders that tells another story. She may sense her partner is stressed before he admits it. Intuition allows for empathy in action, caring for what isn't yet spoken. This is where intuition blends with other aspects of female psychology. Attention, memory, emotion, empathy, they all interlock. Attention provides the raw data. Memory adds context. Emotions act as a compass, telling us what matters. Empathy bridges the gap between self and other, and intuition synthesizes it all into an immediate sense of knowing. The broader lesson. For men, the takeaway isn't to see intuition as something mystical or foreign. It's to respect it as a form of intelligence, one that may notice what logic misses in the moment. You don't have to surrender to it blindly, but you also shouldn't brush it off. When you understand that intuition is the product of rapid, unconscious processing, you see it for what it is, another dimension of human intelligence. More importantly, you recognize that female psychology isn't a puzzle to solve or a trick to decode. It's a mirror. It reflects how human beings, at their best, connect, survive, and give meaning to each other's lives. Every glance is a piece of data. Every memory is a record of experience. Every emotion is a compass pointing toward what matters. Every empathetic gesture is a bridge between souls, and every intuitive nudge is a signal, one worth pausing to hear. The real secret. At the end of the day, intuition is less about magic and more about presence. It's about noticing, even when you're not aware you're noticing. It's about the human brain's remarkable ability to process patterns faster than conscious thought can keep up with. Women, on average, may show stronger abilities here, but the truth is, we all have access to it. Respecting intuition doesn't just improve relationships, it expands your own awareness. It teaches you to notice the details, to value the unspoken, to trust that sometimes the body knows before the mind explains. That's the deeper message. Female psychology isn't a set of tricks. It's a guide to understanding the richness of human connection. When you respect it, you don't just get closer to others, you also grow closer to yourself.